I had always enjoyed the solitude of my little cottage in the woods, nestled far away from the chaos of the city. The quiet, the cool breeze rustling through the trees, and the occasional hoot of an owl were the only sounds that accompanied me most nights. But tonight something was different, something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a crisp autumn evening, and I had decided to spend the night alone while my family visited relatives in the neighboring town. I savored these moments of solitude, a rare luxury in a bustling world. The fireplace crackled with warmth as I curled up on the couch, engrossed in a book. The clock on the wall ticked away, each chime a reminder that I was alone. Around midnight, I decided to retire to my bedroom. I switched off all the lights and made my way through the dimly lit corridor. As I climbed into bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had crept over me. The wind outside had picked up, making the trees sway and creak like ancient specters. I tried to shrug it off as my imagination playing tricks on me, but the unease persisted. Just as I was beginning to drift into a fitful slumber, I was jolted awake by a sound. A series of sharp, deliberate knocks echoed through the stillness of the night. My heart raced and I sat up, straining to hear any further noises. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the thumping of my own heartbeat. I considered the possibility of a tree branch or some animal causing the noise, but it sounded deliberate, like someone was at my front door. I summoned the courage to get out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and tiptoed towards the front of the cottage. The knocking resumed, louder this time, more insistent. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. I hesitated for a moment, then mustered the courage to swing the door open. To my astonishment, there was nothing there. The porch was bathed in moonlight, casting eerie shadows on the steps leading up to my front door. My flashlight's beam reached out into the darkness, but there was no sign of anyone or anything. I stepped onto the porch, my heart pounding, and scanned the area, but it was empty. I chalked it up to my imagination getting the best of me. Perhaps it was the wind playing tricks with the old wood of the cottage. Relieved but still uneasy, I closed the door and locked it securely. Back in my bedroom, I tried to convince myself that I had overreacted. I crawled back into bed, but sleep eluded me. Minutes turned into hours as I lay awake, the knocking incident still fresh in my mind. Just as I was starting to feel my eyelids grow heavy, a noise from downstairs shattered the silence. It was a low, guttural growl, almost inhuman. I froze, my heart in my throat. The growling grew louder, followed by a series of heavy thuds, as if something massive was moving about in the living room. Fear gripped me, paralyzing my every muscle. I reached for my phone, intending to call the police, but it slipped from my trembling hand and crashed to the floor, its screen shattering. With no way to call for help, I had no choice but to confront whatever was downstairs. I crept out of bed and grabbed a heavy lamp as a makeshift weapon. The growling continued, morphing into an unsettling mixture of snarls and wheezing breaths. My flashlight was still on the nightstand, and I knew I had to retrieve it. I inched my way towards the bedroom door, each step feeling like an eternity. The growling seemed to get closer, and I could now hear the sound of something scraping against the walls. I reached the door, turned the handle, and rushed to grab the flashlight. As I turned it on, its beam revealed a horrifying sight. Standing at the bottom of the staircase was a grotesque, hulking figure. It was humanoid in shape, but its skin was mottled and pale, its limbs unnaturally elongated. Its eyes, voids of darkness, fixed on me with an unsettling intensity. With a blood-curdling screech, it lunged towards me. I screamed and bolted back into my bedroom, slamming the door shut. The creature slammed into it with a force that rattled the entire frame. I knew I couldn't stay there. It was only a matter of time before it broke through. Desperation fueled my actions. I rushed to the window and threw it open, knowing it was a perilous escape. I clambered out onto the roof, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature continued to assault the door behind me, its furious growls echoing in the night. The rooftop offered a limited escape, and I had no choice but to crawl towards the edge, intending to jump down and flee into the woods. As I inched closer, I heard a sickening creaking sound from behind. I turned to see the creature, its grotesque form now on the roof, crawling towards me with unearthly agility. I couldn't wait any longer. I took a deep breath and leaped from the roof, landing with a painful thud. My body ached, but adrenaline propelled me forward. I ran blindly through the dark woods, branches scratching at my skin, tears streaming down my face. I didn't stop until I reached a nearby neighbor's house, and I frantically pounded on their door until they answered. I babbled about the creature and begged them to call the police. They must have thought I was insane, but they made the call. When the police arrived, they searched my cottage but found nothing out of the ordinary. There was no sign of the creature, no evidence of the ordeal I had endured. They looked at me with skepticism, but they couldn't deny the terror in my eyes. I never returned to that cottage in the woods. My family sold it, and I moved far away, trying to leave the nightmares behind. To this day, I have no explanation for what I encountered that night. Was it a malevolent spirit? A creature from some dark realm? Or simply a figment of my imagination? I may never know the truth, but the memory of that night still haunts me. A chilling reminder that sometimes, when you're alone in the darkness, something sinister may come knocking at your door, and there's no guarantee that it will ever leave you in peace.
The cabin had been in my family for generations, nestled deep within the dense, untamed woods. It was a place of solace, where the chaos of the outside world faded away, and the only sounds were those of nature, the rustling leaves, the chirping birds, and the distant gurgling of a hidden stream. But on this particular weekend, the tranquility of the cabin would be shattered by something far more sinister. I had invited a group of friends for a weekend getaway, eager to share the beauty and serenity of the cabin with them. We arrived late in the afternoon, the sun casting long shadows through the towering trees. As we approached the cabin, excitement filled the air. It was a quaint, wooden structure with a wide, welcoming porch, and a massive stone fireplace dominated the living room. The first night passed uneventfully. We spent our time reminiscing, playing board games, and savoring a hearty, home-cooked meal. The warmth of the fire and the laughter of my friends made it a night to remember. But as the second day faded into evening, a palpable unease settled upon us. A storm brewed on the horizon, the sky darkening with thick, ominous clouds. The wind howled through the trees, and rain began to pelt the cabin's windows. It was as if the very elements were conspiring to unsettle us. As we gathered around the fireplace, telling ghost stories and trying to shake off our growing unease, a noise outside interrupted our merriment. It was a faint rustling, like footsteps on wet leaves. We all fell silent, straining our ears to listen. It could have been an animal, but something about it felt off. Reluctantly, I rose from my seat and approached the window. Peering out into the dark woods, I saw nothing but the swaying trees and the rain-soaked ground. I told myself it was just a raccoon or a deer, but the unease lingered. Returning to the group, I tried to brush off the sound, but my friends were clearly on edge. We decided to lock all the doors and windows, not taking any chances in the remote wilderness. As the storm ragged on outside, we huddled together for comfort. Hours passed, and as the clock neared midnight, the unease grew to a fever pitch. We heard it again. The same rustling sound, this time closer, more deliberate. It was unmistakably the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, as if someone were prowling around the cabin. Panic seized us. I reached for a flashlight, and my friends clutched whatever makeshift weapons they could find. A fireplace poker, a heavy vase. We moved cautiously towards the door, our hearts pounding in our chests. The rain had intensified, its drumming on the cabin's roof drowning out all other sounds. With trembling hands, I unlocked the door and swung it open, the flashlight's beam cutting through the darkness. But there was nothing there. The woods stood empty and still, the rain-slicked trees casting eerie, elongated shadows. My friends and I exchanged nervous glances, unable to explain the footsteps we had heard. We decided to venture outside, despite our fear, to investigate further. The storm raged on, drenching us within seconds, as we combed the area around the cabin. We found nothing out of the ordinary. No footprints, no signs of intruders. It was as if the woods themselves had swallowed the trespasser. Our search yielded no answers, only a growing sense of dread. We retreated inside, locking the door once more, but the unease clung to us like a second skin. We resumed our vigil around the fireplace, the warmth offering little comfort against the creeping fear that we were not alone. Hours dragged on, and exhaustion began to weigh heavily on us. The storm outside showed no sign of abating, and our nerves were frayed. Just as we were considering the possibility that we had overreacted, a chilling sound filled the cabin, the unmistakable creak of a floorboard. We froze, our breaths caught in our throats. The noise came from the hallway, just beyond our line of sight. We had locked all the doors and windows, so there was no logical explanation for the sound. With trembling hands, I rose from my seat. The flashlight clutched tightly. My friends remained frozen, their eyes wide with terror. Slowly, I edged toward the hallway, the wooden floor creaking softly under my weight. As I turned the corner, the beam of my flashlight illuminated a sight that sent shivers down my spine. A shadowy figure stood at the end of the hall, partially obscured by darkness. It was tall and unnaturally thin, its limbs elongated, and its eyes glinted with a malevolent gleam. I gasped, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure seemed to materialize out of thin air, and I couldn't fathom how it had entered the cabin. My friends rushed to my side, their horrified gasps echoing my own. The figure began to move towards us, its footsteps silent on the wooden floor. Panic overcame us, and we fled, bolting for the front door. But it was locked, just as we had left it, and no amount of frantic pulling could open it. Desperation set in as the figure drew closer, its inhuman form inching toward us. With no other option, we turned and sprinted down the hallway, seeking any way out. In our panic, we missed the door to the cellar, hidden beneath a worn rug. The cellar door swung open, revealing a steep, rickety staircase leading into darkness. We had no time to think. We descended into the unknown, slamming the door shut behind us. It was pitch black, and the only sounds were our ragged breaths and the faint drip of water. We huddled together in the cold cellar, our fear gnawing at us. Hours passed in silence, and as dawn approached, we mustered the courage to venture back upstairs. The cabin was empty, and there was no sign of the sinister intruder. We decided to leave immediately, leaving behind the cabin and the nightmare that had unfolded within its walls. The storm had finally subsided, and the first light of dawn broke through the trees. As we hurriedly packed our belongings, we couldn't help but glance back at the cabin one last time. In the pale morning light, it stood as it always had, seemingly untouched by the horrors of the night. We couldn't explain what had happened, and we didn't want to. We knew we had narrowly escaped something otherworldly, something that should never have existed in the remote solitude of the woods. With heavy hearts, we left the cabin behind, driving away as fast as we could. The memory of that night would forever haunt our dreams, a chilling reminder that even in the most tranquil of places, there are terrors lurking in the shadows, waiting to intrude upon our reality.